strategy webinar. And just a few housekeeping rules. I'd like to ask if everybody could mute their mics and keep their cameras off. And just a keynote, we'll be actually taking questions at the end of the webinar. So please take notes and ask at the end. And just to highlight your presenters today, it's myself, Mpoma Fune. I'm the head of the Advanced Business Analytics focus area at Opti-Num Solutions. Joining me today is Jacqueline Atzango. She's a senior software engineer at Opti-Num. And the agenda for today will be actually looking at going to the fundamentals. First, actually defining what a data-driven company is. With that, we'll then go on to talk about data-driven capability levels. So with this, we actually would like to challenge you guys to start thinking about your organization, not just your organization, but actually your department, and which level of being data-driven are they at as we walk you through that. Following that, we'll then like to actually make it a little bit more practical, actually take you through 3 critical client journeys and show you how throughout Opti-Num's partnership with the client, those clients have become more data-driven over time. And then after the practical examples, I would like to actually step back, start summarizing and orienting us so that we are thinking from a strategic level. And with this, we're actually thinking about the enterprise data-driven strategy. We're looking at the people and processes, and then the tools and software as well. And we'll end off with highlighting who you can reach out to after the webinar. Not only that, opening the floor to any questions that may pop up. And just to start off, what is a data-driven company? It's actually something extremely simple. It's actually a company that integrates data into its decision-making and strategy. And basically all companies out there are actually data-driven. But one key thing is that actually differentiates one data-driven company from another is actually the value they derive from their data. And with value, what I'm highlighting here is actually along the x-axis, you see the increasing value, but not only that, the associated difficulty in terms of deriving that value. What we find with most businesses is actually they ask and they tend to look at what happened, right? They look at a business KPI such as revenue, for example, look at trends, look at performance over the past months. And that's what we call descriptive analytics. This allows a business to answer what happened. But above and beyond that is the why did it happen? Let's take, for example, look, if a business is looking at revenue around March 2020, with the onset of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, you might find that the revenue tanked. And with that context and that extra information, they're able to diagnose why. Why is the revenue actually declining? And then moving on from that is then what will happen? This is where you find a lot of what people are talking about, the machine learning models, the AI. This is where you're actually forecasting and trying to figure out what will happen in the future. This is what we call predictive analytics. And fine, okay, a business can then look at the revenue in the next 2 years, 3 years, model that, but there's even a layer above that, which is how can we make it happen? This is where a lot of the innovative companies sit. They're asking and working with the analytics team to build scenarios, different scenarios of where they, let's just say, for example, they might be thinking of launching a new product and trying to figure out what the potential engagement of those customers will look like, or how would their revenue shift and change between different scenarios and different permutations of the business sort of decisions and pivots. And basically what's happening is a business is actually moving from hindsight to foresight, actually taking information and utilizing that to optimize over time. And one of the key sort of enablers for data-driven companies, and these key enablers are what we actually think are important to keep in mind. One is a data-driven culture, and a culture that's driven by leadership. Leadership is asking the right questions, right? Such as, how can we make it happen? What happened? Why did it happen? And not just leadership, but also the people and processes that enable that, and then the tools and software that are being used in the organization. So now that I've taken a moment to define what a data-driven company is, I'd like to hand over to Jacqueline, and she'll walk us through the different levels in which a company can find themselves in.
Thanks, Mpho. So it's important to try and identify, okay, where is your organization on its journey to becoming more data-driven? So we've put together this grid, which is highlighting an increase in data-driven capabilities as you increase in data maturity. So the baseline looks like a level 0. You have data sources, but they might not be up to date. Maybe the data is not collected frequently. You might also have a case where you do actually have some kind of storage of data, but the information is manually captured. So this is the base level. And a transition from this would be to move up into level 1, and you can find an organization here which is actually utilizing the data that they have across the different departments, but this is a sort of uncoordinated use. This is where you tend to see silos. There's no standardization of how the information is used. You don't have any shared processes or workflows. And a move from this would be moving to a level 2, where you're actually building a secure data repository. So you're consolidating all of the data that is relevant in this organization, putting it into some sort of system like a data warehouse, a data lake system, and there's also governance that is put into place. And this is a really good foundation, actually, for starting to do reporting and analytics, because you have the safety of having data that is consolidated, that is frequently up to date. And transitioning from this to a higher level is we'd actually have varying governance and access control of your data. So this is where your data is not just securely housed, it's also taking into account the different business units, the different levels of expertise, and who can access this data. And this is very important, especially if you're in quite a large organization. You have varying controls of who's accessing the data, and you also have quite a nice baseline to continue the reporting and analytics relevant to your department within the organization. And moving from this step, you would be in a level 4. This is, we calling it a data insight hub. At this stage, you would be doing rapid analytics. You'd probably be looking at building models, doing some deployment. So this is, simulating certain behaviors of business problems that you have to try and solve those problems using the data that you have. And there's the continuous governance of the data environment that is available. You might actually start to see some dedicated data teams. So this would be data engineers who are continually working with the business to update the relevant fields in the data, and data science teams. And they would really be working with the stakeholders to understand what the business problems are, how can they solve that using advanced tools, using modeling. And level 4 is actually, it's quite a good level to be, but we have a 5th level articulated. And what level 5 looks like is actually having a data-driven culture. So as Mpho had highlighted, here you have data and insights, which are actually seamlessly integrated into your business policies, into your processes. So this is a continuous loop where you have information, and this information directly feeds into an action that the organization would take. So I just like to pause quickly, give you a chance to maybe think about which level your organization is in. This is an anonymous poll, so you would only just see the results. We're not going to be exposed. Cool, thank you. Sure, we will see the updates of that in the chat. But given this foundation and just understanding the different levels and how we see an organization being data mature, we'd actually like to take you through some journeys that we've taken with certain clients on their move and their journey to becoming more data driven. The first client is a financial client, and their particular journey was to become more data driven in their decision making. So the key business objectives here were optimize your product portfolio, to increase revenue, to understand the customer behavior and the impact of policy changes, as well as to determine the opportunities for automation. So just taking a step back in light of these objectives, this particular client actually had over 300 products in their portfolio. So this is quite a lot of portfolio, a large portfolio and a lot of products to keep track of. Actually added a lot of operations that needed to go in the background. And the client really wanted to understand from just highlighting the first business objective, are there products that actually clients frequently buy together? Is there some kind of trend or behavior that can be capitalized on? Are there products that only one customer buys? So is there an opportunity to discontinue some products and actually minimize this portfolio? As well as automation. I mean, there's a lot of operations that's going behind the scenes to manage this. Can this be automated? So our approach into engaging with this client was to take on the use case of the first objective. Okay, let's optimize the product portfolio. And with this, we had to really investigate the available data sources just to understand what information is available, what do we know about the products and the clients, what are the existing processes that we are going through, who are the people responsible in this field. And I think this was really important because we were able to diagnose that there were actually some issues in terms of meeting this objective. And one of the first ones was data integrity. So in looking through this data, we found that there's actually some missing data and also manipulated fields. So this made it really difficult from an outsider to try and build some kind of optimization tool. As much as it was a very exciting challenge, we actually needed to first see what we could do about improving the data that was available. Something else that stood out was key man dependency. So this is where you'd actually have only one person with a Excel spreadsheet that would be joined to certain tables in manners that the other members of the department were not aware of. And this made it quite difficult to keep track of how information is flowing, how some of the reports are made. And this is something that we really wanted to work with the client to actually improve this level of information that was available. So where we went next is to actually put in some building blocks in place in terms of this journey, this pipeline of actually meeting these business objectives. So similar to what Paul mentioned earlier, where one of the key dependencies for a data-driven culture is actually the leadership. So it was all about engaging with leadership, taking the use case. This is what we found in the data. These are the trends, but this is what needs to happen in terms of becoming more data-driven and to make decisions with this data that is available. So really engaging with the leaders and the teams that would be utilizing this information. And second to that, the infrastructure that would be required. So how do we build this in? What tools would we use? And we really worked with the client and the IT teams to understand what would be the best fit for them, and how we could go forward in terms of all of us meeting the business objectives. So this is a client that we really enjoyed working with, and the continued partnership looks like actually putting together what we had proposed in terms of really working to improve the data maturity. So that's consolidating the data requirements, standardizing the management and the workflow of the data, and then moving on to performing analytics and automating the reports. So this could save up to 80% of their time in terms of freeing up space and having reports that already generate the insights for them, and help them drive the decisions that they need to drive based on the data that is available. So another client journey that I'd like to talk about is actually a telco client. And the telco client was actually looking to enhance product development. So the business objectives here were assisting in driving product development strategy, optimize and increase revenues and product engagement, as well as adapting to the economic climate experienced by the customer base. So just taking a step back, there are some similarities between this client's objectives and the previous, where we're looking at increasing revenues. However, this is more about new product development and new strategies. And just thinking about telcos, telco is an industry where there's a lot of data that is generated. So we were actually coming at a point where the data is actually already governed. The data is stored appropriately, and the level in which we were coming through is from an optimization and strategy perspective. So some of the challenges from a telco, for example, it's constantly evolving. In the past, we used to make a lot more phone calls using voice and airtime. Now you can very easily do that over IP, making WhatsApp calls. And some of these are the things to consider from a telco perspective. How do you stay relevant with these changing behaviors that your customer is experiencing? So given that we didn't really need to do a lot of building on the data side, where we really came in was building the optimization and modeling. So I'm just going to zoom into some of these components. We broke it down into data-driven optimization, as well as the advanced analytics support. And in the first block, this actually speaks a lot to your modeling. So simulating certain behaviors or understanding the base using advanced techniques. The first one is elasticity. So if you had to change the price of a product by 1 Rand, would customers still buy it? If you changed it by 20 Rand, how many customers would still be interested in that? So, really trying to understand those kind of insights, performing clustering, customer segmentation, for example, which regions are people buying particular products? Is there a time of day or a particular day where people are behaving in a certain way? And these models were really intricate in advising how to really adapt to the evolving customer behavior. Even given the COVID pandemic, as Paul had mentioned earlier, what impact does that have to a telco? And the next leg was this analytical support. So it's one thing to have the analysis, but also how do you forecast into the future? How are these changes going to behave or impact the customer in 2 months' time? How do you report on this? Which stakeholders want to see what information? So really thinking about that and working with the client to understand what information is relevant, how frequently it's needed, and just being able to adapt to this changing environment. And this leads to dynamic prices. So we have products, we identify these gaps, we identify these patterns, and build products to suit that behavior and continue adapting, bringing out dynamic prices that the customers can immediately engage with. Immediately we're actually able to see the behavior because of the nature of the telco industry. This information feeds directly back into the databases, and we're able to extract that from our reporting frameworks and really understand what the impact was, what difference has been made, what's the elasticity. And yeah, it's a really exciting space to be in, moving from a space where you have a lot of data and you have these models and you're really engaging with the customers and seeing how they respond to the different strategies that are put out. So what this looks like, this is actually a client we've been working with for over 12 years. So we very excited to continue identifying the insights in the business, identifying these gaps, finding opportunities to put in new value, and really adapting the models that we've created and enhancing the business decisions that are made. Yeah, and with that, I'll hand over to Paul to speak to another client journey.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. Jacqueline did a good job walking us through two critical journeys. One with a telco client that actually has a lot of data, big data, basically, and showing how we transform that to some insights. And then the first one, speaking to a financial client and looking at actually optimizing a big chunk of their business, and in particular the products, right? And so what I would like to walk you through now is actually a property client. It's actually a rental property client, so they provide rentals. And they approached us not really knowing what they wanted, which we really appreciated, but they actually told us key business objectives, though. They said that they wanted to generate more rental income, they wanted to increase retention rates within their units, and they also wanted to reduce operational costs, right? And so in thinking about this and actually putting the different hats around how we work with data, we actually started off with an idea, and it was actually in 2018. The idea was to actually build a vacancy forecasting model. And so this model, it's a forecasting model that predicts vacancies for every rental price change. So in this way, we wanted to understand what sort of price point would generate revenue for the business, but also be appealing to the customer. And so alongside that, what we did, thinking from a data science perspective, we also implemented a customer segmentation algorithm. And with this, we wanted to understand who are the customers. Fine, we're pricing accordingly, but who are we pricing it for? What are their characteristics? Are they like families with children? Are they students? How can we then pivot and play around with the price? And we've taken this journey with them since 2018, and it's been a long, long, long journey till now. There's a lot we've done. I won't touch on all of it, but I would like to highlight a little bit of what we did in 2019. So with the success of the vacancy forecast, the business asked us, can we look at arrears? Arrears were becoming a key business problem at that time, to actually understand how the evolution of arrears and where they expect to be in the next couple of months and year or so. We then moved on to 2020 with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was a big shift in the business. I think the housing industry was actually worried quite a lot. And so the client approached it and said, okay, can you guys assist here? And one of our thinking was then to build a scenario analysis to kind of simulate, because with the president's announcement, we got to know which industry will be live, right? So we could at least kind of start mapping which one of their customers might be impacted in terms of their ability to pay. So what we did, we started simulating different scenarios and how that would impact the revenue for the business over time. And the business found it quite helpful in regards to planning, not just for that moment in time, but how to pivot as time evolved within the pandemic. And yeah, and that's kind of what, in terms from a data science perspective, we've built. But one of the key sort of missing element was a reporting element. So in engaging with the client, we realized that the insights, the information, is not exactly accessible. And so we needed something where the client can, maybe when they're on the move, can look on their phone, log in, be able to view a report. And so what we did with them, we actually built a Power BI dashboard. This was exclusively for the executives, and we wanted to see and pilot that sort of platform for the client. And it's been something that they've been quite receptive to and found it easy to use and allows them to access the data and information and insights right away. And this is actually, I feel like we've been working with them for a while, but it's just the start of an exciting journey with them and an exciting sort of partnership we've had as Opti-Num with the client. And so what we're looking in regards to the future, we're not just looking to pivot with them as their business focus and needs change and highlighting the appropriate analysis, but rather also actually further automating their pipeline. So one of the key sort of elements is the integration of where the information sits to getting the insights, but also those insights reaching the appropriate stakeholders, whether that's management or the finance team or any other team in the organization. We're also looking to integrate these models more into the company. They found them insightful, and so would like to deploy them in form of web apps that are accessible across organizational teams. And so behind this all, what we're thinking about as the Opti-Num team is kind of the transformation and growth from these sort of 4 points: the data warehousing, the modeling and analytics, the reporting, and then the product services. So I've highlighted it with red, orange, and green. And just to show kind of the progress they've made. So in 2018, a lot of the modeling and analytics wasn't really there. A lot of the data-driven sort of product and service development wasn't necessarily there. But since then, there's been a lot of evolution. And what we've seen is a lot of enhancement in the reporting. It's still work in progress, but really great strides there, and also in the other components as well. And just to bring these components into live, I'll actually like to step back and actually have us start thinking about the enterprise data-driven strategy as a whole, because you've gotten a sense of how it practically happens for each and every client. And it's always unique to that client. You know, what do they need at that time to meet the business objective? And also pivoting accordingly if anything maybe socioeconomically happens or within the business happens. And yeah, we want to sort of enable the business to pivot with that. So within enterprise data-driven strategy, I mentioned earlier, it's actually what you're thinking about is the people and processes, but not just that, the tools and software associated to having a data-driven company. So some of the teams that one finds in enterprises, and it's not all enterprises that have these distinct teams, but I'll highlight them because this is where, as your organization grow, you start building the capabilities and the people's needed to accomplish a world data-driven culture. So the first is the DevOps team. These are the people that build and deploy the software in the organization. You then have also your data engineers. These are actually the people who store your data. They just find the appropriate places, whether it's a cloud database, on-prem database, and ensures that they're placed, they're secure and compliant as well. The next team is the BI team, the business intelligence team. This is the team that takes the data that's been stored by the data engineers and then disseminates the insights and information to the appropriate teams. And then alongside that are the data scientists. These are the people that build your models. In the housing example, I mentioned a vacancy forecasting model. The data scientists will be the team that build that and introduce that sort of capability. And then the end users, those are everybody else in the organization. This is the finance team, the executive team, the operations team, anybody else that needs to see and view the information. So when you look deeper and think about the subcomponents needed to achieve this strategy, the way as Opti-Num, the way we break it down is first thinking about the data warehousing. It's actually just as simple as thinking about where to store that data. It has to sit somewhere, right? It has to be secure. It has to be compliant with the acts like the POPI Act, for example. It has to be clean. It has to follow certain business rules. And with the data warehousing, there's various tools out there in the market. As Opti-Num Solutions, we don't necessarily prescribe a tool. There's different tools can be fit for an organization depending on what they need. For example, if your organization is more interested in secure data, you might choose something that's on premises, like a database on premises instead of storing in the cloud, and that cloud potentially storing your data in Europe, for example. So different nuances and requirements, depending on the industry you're in, play a role around there. And so the team that actually drives this forward is actually the DevOps team and the data engineers. And what we actually see in many organizations, what happens is that most organizations are actually migrating the data from legacy systems. They migrated from this database to that database. And projects like that can take as little as a year, but close to 5-10 years. I've seen big insurance company, big telcos migrating their database, but just spending extensive time there. But having the data that's valuable, but it's not valuable until you build the analytics. The analytics, this is where you generate the insights and the foresight for the business. This is where you build your trend, you build your forecasts, but underneath that, you then also have your modeling. When I say modeling, it goes back to building the models that forecast the future. It's building the scenarios that allow you to plan and pivot as a business. And with that, there's various tools out there. I've highlighted quite a few. Python, you might have heard of it. But tools, they're not, we don't prescribe tools, they're means to an end. And there's various options for a given business. As Opti-Num, we actually specialize in MATLAB in particular. But that's just one tool that a person can use. But post the modeling, right, you have this information, it's stored, you're finding the insights, and the team that's doing that is actually your BI and data scientists, right? But that information, it has to reach an audience. And how do you do that? You do that by the reporting layer. This is where you build your static reports, your dashboards. Could be Power BI. I mentioned Power BI earlier. It could be Tableau. It could be as simple as an Excel output. You just open it, see what the revenue has looked like in the past week, or start looking at the elasticity, as Jackie mentioned, just to see a trend. Simple as that, but maybe a little bit more interactive, like a dashboard as well. And the team that tends to support that is it's across teams, right? You basically need almost everybody engaged in the reporting layer. You need the leadership team looking at the reports, but not only that, you actually need a team that actually speaks to the report, whether it's on a weekly basis. Because one of the things, and I'd just like to take a moment on this, because we provide this service with a lot of what we do, whether it's the analytics or the modeling, we try to have weekly meetings where we actually present the insights, because unless the insights are presented and the insights reach the end users, then there are no use. It's just good information sitting somewhere. And one of the best ways to facilitate that is with the engagement and the collaboration. And then the last layer is actually the product and services. This is actually a bit broader, like it's more of the custom applications. I can maybe give a simple example. If you think about a website, for example, maybe you're a finance company and you want people to apply for loans, for example, or like a bank. You'll need a custom website that enables a customer to then go on there and apply for a particular loan. So custom products, maybe custom services that you built with the different the relevant software. And usually the people you have here are the DevOps team that assist with that. But this is just one way to start thinking about the enterprise data-driven strategy. One thing to highlight, though, is kind of some of the interesting insights we've seen. So a lot of the analytics within most businesses, you find that the finance team does that. The finance team tends to look at the data and actually ends up taking on the burden of finding insights. And some of the moments you find that, okay, fine, they can speak to revenue, all of that, but they don't have the time to actually then look at understanding who the customer is. What are the segments looking like? And you need a dedicated team. And that's where usually Opti-Num Solutions plays a role. We try to plug in and kind of provide this type of support, depending on where the organization is, whether it's small or large, whether it's highly data-driven or not. We walk the journey with the client to accomplish that. And then, yeah, with this in mind, I would actually like to then highlight, because this is just a start of what we can talk about. I know Jacqueline and I were excited about what we'll present today, and we've just barely scratched the surface. So if you'd like to actually reach out to us to just talk a little bit more to this, I'm just sharing our emails here. You can also reach out to Michelle as well. She's been in contact, kind of, she's the person behind the marketing. And then I just wanted to actually take the time to kind of introduce you to the broader Opti-Num as well. Today, I've kind of talked in regards to the advanced business analytics focus area. There's other focus areas and competencies such as smart industry. This is the mining and manufacturing space, the digital engineering, teaching and research. So we do work with educational institutions, financial engineering, and also enterprise deployment. So Opti-Num Solutions is quite broader than what I've highlighted today, but I just wanted to highlight it. But more importantly, we've spent quite a lot of time talking about the journeys we've taken with our clients. A really sort of critical element in the success in regards to driving and working and partnering with our clients is our core values. Actually, that's something that we carry, and it's something that we base our actions on. And I'll just highlight two values that have actually made us quite successful with our clients and allowed us to walk the journey. One is the collaboration and communication. It's very important. Like, the data is no use if it sits somewhere. It's actually more useful when it reaches the appropriate people. So in helping facilitate and kind of meet the strategy, underlying strategy that we look at, we rely heavily on the collaboration and communication, not just amongst ourselves, but with our clients. And then also ownership and proactivity. So one of the sort of things that we encounter, maybe a client we're working with, for example, and they're able to assist from a business perspective, we really take the ownership and proactivity from a data perspective and actually educating and working with our clients in that manner. But with that said, I'd like to actually pause and actually open the floor if there are any questions. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to just put them in the chat. And I also wanted to open the floor to Jackie as we wait for questions, if there are any. You can speak to the poll in the meantime, what we've seen.
Sure, thanks, Mpho. So yeah, I actually see we have quite a few, we have 40% on level 1, and we have actually engaged with quite a few clients, like the first client journey we spoke to being a level 1. So it's a good space to kind of recognize that we need to improve and work together so that actually the data is consolidated and there's reduced silos within certain organizations. And then there's also 20% in level 2. So that shows quite a good step forward in terms of really just consolidating all of that information and having the security in place. Then there's 40% in level 5. I think I would like to speak to those people. Yeah, but just from that, and even with the journeys that we both spoke to, as Mpho highlighted, you find a client at a different step of the way if they want to actually work on their data or use their data. So building models and performing the analytics versus actually consolidating the data. These are things that we've done across clients. So it doesn't really matter given the skills and the expertise that we have. We're actually able to plug in whether it's from a level 0, level 1, or level 3 and wanting to move up. And that's something that we always excited in doing and finding new challenges and really collaborating with the client.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we can simply leave it at that. It was actually a really high-level presentation just to bring you in to start thinking about your organization, your department, where you are, things to consider, but also the underlying business objectives you would like to meet. And if you have a list of those and you'd like to reach out and engage, feel free. And yeah, just thinking about that and potentially thinking about how data could play a critical role. And we always say data internally in the company, but it could be external data. If you're in marketing, it could actually be in social media data, Twitter data, any of that. So yeah, I just wanted to leave it at that. And Michelle, I don't know if you'd like to highlight anything in regards to the correspondence post the webinar.
Yes, thanks, Mpho. So we'll be sharing the webinar recording along with the slides in the next few days.
Great, thank you so much. And we can leave it there. I'll give everybody 12 more minutes in their calendar. And thank you so much for joining.